Hello. Thank you for tuning in back to Benchmark Studios, the podcast. Today, I am honored to be having this special guest on here who's known me throughout my whole entire journey of life, all the ups, downs, jail, whatever you want to call it. She has been here and she's known me the entire journey of my life. Today, I'm here with Becca, right? She is technically the title is Dr. Fincher-Kiefer.
Yes, such a mouthful.
Right? And she is an amazing person, and anyone that has the honor to talk to her, I guarantee will tell you that she is a great person. So you guys all get the honor to sit and listen to Becca talk about who she is and how she came about, and her little life story of where she is today. So thank you for joining us on the podcast.
You're so welcome. It's my honor.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I love conversations with you, Nate. And I'm so honored to be here, really. Right. Flattered.
Yeah.
Privileged.
Well, I think we should just get into it. Just kind of tell us a little bit about who was Becca as a child.
I love watching your podcast, so I was thinking, I bet you Nate's going to ask me something about it. Who was Becca as a child? And I don't where to start. I grew up in a very small family. I had a fierce and independent mother, 6 foot tall. She was something to be reckoned with, and she went to college at the University of Tennessee in a time when very few women were going to college. Her slightly older sister, they were like 18 months apart, was one of the first 40 women to go to Virginia Tech Institute. Wow. So they were, I say that because to kind of represent or show that they were very big into education, and even though they actually didn't get along very well. But my mother came from this, a father who had been the oldest of 10 children and the first to go to college. And so she married her college sweetheart. And after some years of trying, she had a job. She was a journalist, and she had her own column in the Kingsport News in Tennessee. Yeah. And then after they got married, when they decided they were going to have children, my father, her husband at that time, had a working mom. And he said, as an only child, he was an only child, he said, I didn't really like having a working mom. There was a lot of time when I was alone, and so I would really like you to be a stay-at-home mom. And again, fiercely independent, she was like, okay, I'll do that. So she had twins. And that was it. My sister and I were her only children, my twin and I. And then my father was tragically killed in a car accident when we were 2. And so she was then a single mom, a widowed mom for a few years. And then she married, as I think was probably really important in the 60s, get a male influence in your life. And she married a divorced man that was my stepfather, and I loved him very much. He's who I called Daddy all my life, right, in the Southern tradition. Right. But she was a frustrated stay-at-home mom, I would say. She should have always had a job because she had a lot of intelligence to share and to give to my twin and myself. My twin went to vet school after college. She went to Penn State. I went to Washington College, a little school on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And so she was going to vet school. I went to graduate school in psychology, and that's how I went to University of Pittsburgh, went from University of Pittsburgh to Gettysburg College, where I had my career of 34 years in the classroom and as a researcher.
34 years?
Yeah, 34 years.
In the classroom as a researcher.
That's a long time.
That is a long time. I'm not even 34 years old yet.
Yeah,
so you've been a professional longer than I've been alive.
I know. And this, again, when I was going through this life of mine, this was a fairly typical trend to get your first job and stay in it until you retired. That is so not done today, right? I mean, and in academia, it's more likely because you go through, this tenure process. And tenure means you have that job for life. Like
Right.
you have to do something very bad to be fired or let go. And it's also harder to move from institution to institution after you get tenure. And that happens in your 7th year. So it sounds like 10 years, but it's a 7-year thing. It's a process that you go through, and you're evaluated as a teacher and a researcher. And when you get that, you're kind of like, okay, this is what I'm going to do until I decide to leave. And after 34 years, I had enough. So now I'm fully retired.
Fully retired.
Yeah. I met my husband as an undergraduate, and he followed me to Pitt, thankfully. And we got married a year into graduate school. And then we came to Gettysburg. I started this job, and I got to have Will and Cody in that process.
Yeah.
Grew up in Gettysburg.
How long have you been married?
We've been married for 42 years this August.
Okay. Congratulations. That's hard to do.
It's
Marriage
really
is
hard to
difficult.
do.
I feel like marriage is really
hard
difficult,
to
and
do.
especially nowadays,
know.
relationships is difficult.
I agree.
Yeah. So
I agree.
what got you into psychology though? Like, was there a motivation? Because so for instance, like me, I didn't know that I wanted to be a mentor. It kind of just happened.
Right.
For me, I thought I was going to be El Chapo or Pablo Escobar.
Uh-huh.
But now I'm a mentor.
Right.
At a school.
I like that goal.
Right. So it changed, and life
Yes, it
changes.
did.
And we kind of got to learn to adapt. But what made Becca interested in psychology and wanted to be a professor?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that a lot of people don't reflect on. Why did I choose psychology? I think in all truth, a lot of times it's such a random thing, and that's true for me, that, I was a kid probably in high school thinking about what do I like, what areas do I like, and I had a family friend who was a good bit older than my sister and I mean, probably at least 5+ years, and she was already in college, and she was studying this thing called psychology. Mm-hmm. And, I would ask her, like, what is that? And she wanted to help people. And so she wanted to be a clinical psychologist, which we'll talk about. And it sounded so cool and, sexy. It was like, wow, that's cool. And she was a very cool chick.
Right.
So I was a little in love with that and thought, okay, that sounds good for me too.
Right.
And I loved science. I mean, I did love science, but my sister was a more kind of intuitive, and she was so bright, and she went the more science-y route and went into she went to Penn State for an undergraduate degree in animal science. And so that was her path, and my path was more about people. And once I got to actually be able, as an undergraduate, to study psychology and the behavior of people and what psychology was all about, I decided, yep, that friend of mine, Meg, was right. That's going to be me, but I'm not going to take the clinical path. I'm going to take the other path.
Right.
So,
you might not know this, but you sent me, well, obviously, you sent me research papers before that I've read, right? And I appreciated them. And I signed up for college and took psychology because of you.
Oh, so sweet and so wonderful.
Did I graduate?
No.
I found out fast that college wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I didn't like the classes that I was in or the professors that were talking.
Right, which is a shame, but
they didn't make it fun enough for me, and I felt like I wasn't being challenged enough when I was questioned about if I was really writing my paper. I don't think they thought that I was capable of writing a good paper, but they don't know that Will Kiefer would rip my papers to shreds.
Right.
And I know that Will used to send you his documents and his stuff, and you used to do the same to Will.
Yeah.
So they didn't know that, right?
It's all mentoring.
So what's the difference between clinical psychology and just like psychology? Experimental psychology.
Yep. So you've got this umbrella term of psychology, and this is a great question because really very few people know this. I think most people think of psychology as the field that helps people. And so most people think of that big term of psychology as the science of helping people.
Right.
And it is, of course, there's a branch, and it's probably a larger percentage of people go into the branch of clinical psychology, which I would call applied psychology. So under this umbrella of psychology as a term, there's applied psychology fields and there are experimental fields. And the difference is that the applied ones, the goal is in any applied field is to help people, to develop therapies, to use the science to improve life.
Right.
The other side that people just don't think about is what we call basic science fields, and that's experimental psychology. And those areas of psychology are using the science to develop theories, to test hypotheses, to understand what therapies are better than others.
Right.
And those basic scientists provide the pool of data, research that the applied scientists pull from. It feeds them. So, in the applied side, we have clinical psychologists. If you take clinical psychology to its terminal end, you get a PhD in clinical psychology. It's quite a hard degree it's very competitive to get into those programs. But at the end of them, you can hang a shingle and you can, whatever you're interested in, whatever behavioral interests you have. Most clinical psychologists are dealing with more severe mental health issues, maybe schizophrenia, maybe depression, maybe manic depression, the kind of more serious we really need to work on these problems for a long time. Also in that applied side is counseling psychologists. You can get a master's in counseling psychology. You can even get a master's in social work and be in the kind of applied side of clinical psychology. So clinical psychology, counseling psychology, these areas are working to help people work through problems. And counseling psychologists are typically the ones that are dealing with less severe mental health issues. So, perhaps family therapy, couples therapy, addictions, things like that, paranoias. Now another big misconception is that clinical psychologists are the same as psychiatrists. And psychiatrists are medical doctors. So they go through medical school like all of our MDs do. The only thing is at the end they branch off and use psychiatry as their specialty. So psychiatrists are clinical psychologists that can prescribe medicines to deal with those more severe
schizophrenia, things like that.
Exactly.
Right.
So a clinical psychologist that might have a schizophrenic is going, as a patient, is going to need a psychiatrist to prescribe the meds that the clinical psychologist will think will help that person. And so there are relationships, right?
Right.
And but clinical psychologists have again kind of pulled from the science that's been developed by experimental psychologists to understand what are the best programs for treating people.
Right. So there really is no like one is more important than the other. It sounds like everyone needs everyone.
Everyone needs everyone. It's very right? very important. I think like a lot of students that come into, for example, a college setting and say, I want to be a psychologist. What they mean is I want to be a clinical psychologist. When you say, well, here, for example, at my undergraduate institution of Gettysburg College, here we need to train you as an experimentalist so you understand how to do science.
Right.
You need to understand how to actually test hypotheses. And then when you go on to further education, that training will be behind you and you'll get to learn how to treat people.
Yeah.
But you got to understand the science.
Yeah, I think more like I was more interested. I didn't want to like help.
Yeah.
I didn't want to know. I didn't want to get into clinical psychology. I didn't want to like apply it and help people out. I just kind of wanted to understand why people did the things they did.
Yeah, you were me.
Yeah, that was it.
That was me too.
You have a habit. Like how'd you get the habit?
Right.
Like what happened and how can you get rid of the habit?
Right.
So
what
I was more into that.
Motivates you?
Right.
So all of those experimental fields. So there are a lot of them because there's like developmental psychology if you're interested in children and the kind of developmental progression of a behavior. They're like, let's take aggression. those are psychologists that are doing research to say what makes some children aggressive and others not.
Right.
What are the factors? Then you might have a social psychology perspective on that, which if you took that as a point of interest, aggression, social psychologists would look at what kind of group processes make people more or less aggressive, or compliant or obedient. So that's social psychology. Then there's cognitive psychology. That's my field.
Right.
And we're looking at thinking and learning and memory and decision making.
Right.
So what are the thought processes that go into what makes you angry, what makes you mad, or other, processes? What are your memories that are going to pull you towards certain behaviors?
Right.
And then there are others. There are a lot of new fields in psychology that are a true blend, like health psychology, where you're looking at what motivates people to lead healthy lifestyles or not.
Right.
What can be incentives to get people to think about eating properly or drinking properly. Health psychology, cultural psychology. Neuroscience kind of sits on top sometimes of both of those fields of within psychology. You've got neuroscience that feeds information about brain function to both experimentalists and clinical people.
Yeah. Well, how important do you think it is to? Because I think that involves like some of the work that we do, like trying to understand these kids and things like that. How important do you think that type of research? Because you sent me research papers. The research paper that you sent me before was talking about why like black kids are more at risk to get suspended in schools. And I remember reading that a lot of it was because as soon as they walked into these schools, they see white teachers, white people, and they automatically write those people off thinking that they can't relate to me and they don't know anything that I'm going through.
Right.
So it was hard for them to like talk and open up to these teachers and like trust these teachers. Part of that, how my brain starts thinking is like, okay, well, what's the solution then?
Yep.
Right. So we need, obviously, if that's the case, then we need more black teachers. We need more like people to come in and make it more, what's the word, like diverse. Like,
yes, absolutely.
Right. So that we can fix that problem.
Representation. Right. You need that.
So how important do you think like understanding that type of psychology and understanding that thing, how does that apply to like what the work that we do here at Benchmark Program?
Yeah. I think it's essential, right? It was one of my great joys to be a part of at least the beginning of Will's journey in creating Benchmark, where I would just constantly feed him and then you these articles that would say, there's research out there.
Right.
We don't have to just guess.
Yeah.
We could guess, like, it's not good to have all white teachers.
Right.
And that's probably a pretty good guess. But how about research that we can't say proves, because science is never about proving something. It's always suggesting. It's always saying, here is something that looks like from the data that we've been able to get would be a good, again, whether you're talking about learning or whether you're talking about impressions or whatever you're talking about, that research that has examined that problem, whether it's stereotypes or racial biases, all of these, that research needs to eventually feed up to suggestions for improvement. So that's eventually feeding to that applied stuff that we were talking about. The problem is, Nate, there are many problems with this, but the problem is it takes a long, long time for basic research to actually make its way into the real world.
Right.
So like I could send you 100 articles a day and you can think about them and actually work with that data, but is it going to change the world? I don't know, because that science that is presented in research articles that are published, we know it's been well tested, it's been a controlled study there. You can't break it down because someone did something wrong in the study. That's been done by peer reviewers.
Right.
It's how much now is that research going to change because of something else somebody else did and said, well, we need to revise that. because someone else did another study that counters that finding.
Yeah.
And that's science. I mean, that's how science progresses. But you can see why it takes forever to kind of get a result up, bubbled up into this is what you definitively need to do to change the way children are treated,
Right.
or the way teachers are presenting this material. It's little by little by little.
Right. So we can only do so much at a time.
You can only do so much at a time, but you can at least be a good consumer of science like you
Right.
are, and think about, this result suggests this. Maybe we should try this. And, I think Will's done that effectively a number of times, and sometimes it's worked and other times it hasn't.
Yeah, I also think you sent me a paper about kids feeling like, so the type of kids that we work with, like at Suspension Alternative Program, or teenagers,
Yeah.
and what they want to do is feel like they're in control.
Yes.
So how we do things at Suspension Alternative Program is we give them an option.
Yes.
So that, listen, we got, like, for example, we have 3 things to do today. We have to work out, we have to do a lesson, and then we have to get schoolwork done.
Right.
Out of these 3 things, what do you want to do first?
Yeah.
And then they pick it, and then they're more likely to do the other things because they feel like they're in control. They got to control what their day looks like.
Right.
So it's crazy,
So
like stuff like
perfect,
that.
yeah.
Like
It's psychology in action,
Right.
right? It's taking that research finding and putting it into the real world.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always happen easily, but when it happens, it's a beautiful thing.
It is.
Because it's, again, it's not just a random thought. Like, what we know is sense of control gives person a great sense of power.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a loss of control, you feel helpless, and behavior is going to, go in a lot of negative places when you feel helpless or loss of control.
And I feel like a lot of the kids that we work with, they probably feel like they have no control of anything in their lives.
Absolutely.
A lot of the conversation that we have was like control the controllables, understanding that you might not be able to control everything right now. But later, when you get older, like, you can control where you live, you can control where you work, you can control those things. As of right now, I understand that it's difficult.
Right. Right.
Well, I don't understand how difficult it is for that person, but I know it was difficult for me.
No, absolutely.
Right. So, but yeah, I think it's crazy.
I know.
To
I think
apply it and then see it work. I think it's beautiful to see it work.
I do too.
It's crazy.
I do too. And I was thinking about you so much last night. Obviously I was coming here and stuff, and I thought, I used to just do something that anybody can do. Some of this is about having a little bit of a connection with the college and being able to go into their library and do searches that might be more difficult for you to do.
Right.
But because of research databases and stuff like that. But pretty much anybody can do this by just Google searches. Mm-hmm. But I was like, hey, you know what? This is what I used to do for Nate. I would just go on to this research database called PsycInfo, and I would type up, juvenile justice system and blah, blah, blah,
Right.
And so I thought, I'm going to do that right now and just see what gets pulled up. And, I did was juvenile, since you're in a position of leadership now, I did juvenile justice and leadership styles. And I got one dissertation abstract. So this paper has not been published yet. Okay. So it would make me give you caution about trying to find this, because it hasn't been peer reviewed, and again, it hasn't made it to the top of the publication process. But still, I thought you would find it interesting what I found, because you always did. You were such a great student for me. And the title is like Moderating Effects of Organizational Climate and Organizational Culture on the Relationship Between Servant Leadership and Team Effectiveness in a Juvenile Justice Organization. So now we've got benchmark, and it's saying what are the effects of the climate and the culture on the relationship between what they called servant leadership and team effectiveness. And just because the abstract tells you the result of this, it was just saying that servant leadership, which I had to Google to see what does that mean. Servant leadership means a leadership style where you put yourself second to the others that you are serving. And you say, how can I give you control? How can I do things that improve your life, improve your effectiveness walking in the world?
Right.
And that style specifically in juvenile justice organizations is the style that shows effectiveness. So there's an article already, and that's what we were doing. We were exchanging, like, I've got this idea, or if I would see something that I would know would pique your interest, that was a piece of science from basic research, had not yet bubbled up into the applied world. But you would say, like, well, I think we're going to try this thing about control.
Right. I think it was cool just to see, like, reading those papers and then kind of thinking about, like, who I was as a kid and growing up. And it's just kind of like, well, maybe if someone just said it like this or just did it like this, it would have changed my perspective and shifted it to, maybe think a little bit more long term than instead of short term and what's right in front of me.
Yeah.
So the things that you sent me, and then being able to, like, basically, like, test it out and see if we can do something that is effective in here. A lot of the times, sitting down with the team and stuff like that, and then applying it and seeing what it would look like, most of the time it was effective.
Yeah. And it's something to try, again, rather than just kind of randomly going, from my gut, I think it might be good to do this.
Right.
One of the best examples of this, what we're talking about, moving from a research finding to some application of that, is Carol Dweck's work on mindset. And I know you and Will and the group have talked a lot about mindset and that great book just called Mindset. But her finding that was done in controlled experimental settings. She was a developmental psychologist, so she was working with kids. And she was just she asked this basic science question of what kind of praise would be good praise to give to a child. And she had seen a lot of parents, your child does something well and you go, oh my gosh, you did that so well, you're so smart. Look at you, you're so smart. And you want, you think, I want to boost my child's self-confidence. I want them to believe that they're smart. And she thought, I'm going to see if that's a good kind of praise to give. And what's the other option? Well, instead of focusing on intelligence, which the whole point of mindset is that understanding that intelligence is something that's very malleable. It's something that changes all the time. It's not set and fixed.
Right.
And she said, if that's the case, then maybe we shouldn't praise for intelligence. Maybe we should praise for effort. And so she did this great research where she just took kids, she gave them puzzles. This has been extensive research. And half of the kids would get the praise for intelligence. You're so smart. That was so great. Look at you. And the other half of the kids would get the, wow, that was so great. Look at you. You worked so hard. I loved that effort that you put into it. And then the true test comes from now you give them new puzzles and new challenges. And the kids that have been praised for intelligence are like, I got to show I'm smart. I don't think I want to take that next step.
Right.
I'm going to do the same kind of puzzle. I'm going to just, limit. I'm not going to take on challenges.
Right.
Where the kids that have been praised for effort, man, they want to show I'm a hard worker. I'm going to, hey, is there a harder puzzle that I can try?
Right.
I'm going to try that one. That simple finding, feeding up to how do you praise your children? Oh man, I did that. I was a young mother when I read that research.
Yeah.
And I really tried to change and praise for effort, because I think you watch kids, if you've done that, you watch them just kind of swell in this, like, I can work hard and do anything.
Right. I think I do that somewhat with my son, as far as, like, I used to say all the time, like, oh, you're so smart, you're so smart, you're so smart. But I kind of got away from that and just was like, I like when we go to play football or we go to his football practice, soccer practice, it's like, I really encourage, like, the hard work.
Yeah.
Like, you're really out there. It's so hot outside. Nobody wants to be out here.
Right.
But you're putting the work in.
Yeah.
You're doing it. When he has his one-on-one sessions to train and stuff like that, like, you're putting in the hard work. No one else is putting in the hard work. You're out here by yourself. Right? So look around. Who's on the field with you? Just you. So this is, so praising that stuff, that makes a lot of sense.
Doesn't it?
Also, praising, I think Will told me this, and I really believe this, that if the kid starts to believe what you continuously, or like all the time you tell them, you're dumb, you're dumb, you're dumb, you're dumb. Oh, yeah. The kid grows up, and when someone says you're dumb, they're like, yeah, I know. Like I kind of,
Oh, yeah.
I've been told that my whole life.
Absolutely.
So changing the narrative as far as like when we do the work in schools, we do tell them that like, no, bro, you're smart.
Yeah.
You are smart.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And some of the kids are like, I never heard that.
I know.
Or we like, good job. Give
Yeah.
them a pat on the back. Some of the kids never heard good job.
Right.
I'm proud of you.
Right.
They're like, what? It sounds so crazy.
I know.
And it's something so simple that like it's just words. Like you can be a better parent by just watching your mouth, like what you say.
Isn't that the truth?
And we can change so much by just watching what you say. The power of the tongue is very powerful.
I know. And as a parent, you just have to reckon it. If you can be told that, if somebody can just say to you, you know, the words that come out of your mouth about your child will be critical in forming their self-esteem and their self-concept and their sense of self, you know, their sense of being. And when you actively think that, then you're more likely to make good decisions about what to say to them. Right. Saying you're so smart is a great thing to say, to, you know, and then praising them also for effort. Is also a really good thing. You just have to be careful. And I mean, there are a lot of life circumstances that make it difficult for parents to kind of always be on top of that. But you can see it.
Yeah, life's hard being happy. It's hard being happy all the time, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, sometimes you got to go in that mode. I know, like, when I go from work, I know when I'm about to go get my son, sometimes I need, like, a 10-minute just let
me refuel.
That's it. We about to go do this dad thing. So let's do it, you know?
Yeah.
And he doesn't know. Kids don't know. They don't know that, you know, you just worked 8 hours, 9 hours.
They don't care.
They don't, As soon as I get my son, we're going outside. We're going to the pool.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to the pool, Draco. Don't worry about it. We're going to the pool. I'm tired. We're going to get in the pool and we're going to swim, though. That's what we're going to do. So just, you know,
parenting. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do and the most rewarding thing.
Right.
But it is the hardest. It's the hardest.
I think it's very intimidating as far as like, you know, all the stuff that, like, life is crazy and you can't control everything. Yeah. And just hoping that you instill like those morals and principles, like, and hopefully that they're taking note of it and then, you know, applying that to their lives. And yeah, it's intimidating when you think about it.
And you know, you make a lot of mistakes. I mean, you'll say something and then you go to bed and you start thinking about like, oh, I don't know if I didn't say that right, or that was probably not the smartest thing to say to them. Or
I think that's when you know you're being a great parent.
Yeah.
When you're sitting there at night and you're laying in bed and you're like, yeah, we could have did that differently. We talked about it a little bit before we came in here. I wasn't when I first became a dad to my daughter, Nalani, I didn't understand what being a dad was. I was so young. I didn't understand that like time is really valuable to kids. Right. And being around me, not just me buying you things, but you being around me and spending time with your father, like that is meaningful. Yes. So with my son, you here. We're here together.
Yeah.
We're going to spend as much time as we can.
Right.
So much that you know you're going to come to work with me in the summertime sometime, right?
So, I know, it's so wonderful. Right. It's so wonderful you have a space you can do that because it is so important.
Right. But just learning that stuff, like, and learning that, like, you know, it's important to be there, and it's important, like, we do make mistakes. Yeah. Hopefully that you can recover from those mistakes stuff. Yeah. Some mistakes you can't recover from, but my daughter's still young, and we're going to build that relationship, and we're going to get back.
Yeah.
But
that's good. It'll be a gift to both of you.
100%. What? So you being interested in psychology and you knowing all this stuff about psychology, have you ever used psychology on your husband or your kids, Cody and Will?
I'm not giving away my secrets, man. Come on.
Well, let me know, because I want to know how to use some psychology on my son.
You know, I think we've talked about it a little bit even already, that it's, I mean, of course, I've had, you know, there's silly examples of like reverse psychology things I would do the kids. You know, they would eat something new. I really wanted them to have a, you know, a wide palette of interest in their food, you know. Right. So the first time I would give it to them, I'd be like, salmon, yuck, it smells, it's disgusting, it tastes. Then I would wait, like, I'd be like, all right, you know, you got to eat a couple bites of it. Then I would wait maybe 2-3 weeks, enough for their memory to fade. Okay, this is the psychology part. Then I'd give it to them again. I'd be like, you loved this last time I gave it to you. You just thought it was so delicious. They'd kind of look at it, then they taste it. And familiarity is a very strong predictor of of liking. So second, third bite, I was like, okay, it's not so bad. And then again and again and again, constantly kind of telling them something that really wasn't true. You really liked this the first time. So there's a great taste thing. Other than that, I think the general principles of psychology are used as a spouse and a parent, and you kind of have to step back and recognize it sometimes, that general principles of, if you want a behavior to happen again, what do? You reinforce it.
Right.
You say that's a good thing. You pay attention to it. You do the praise the best kind of praise you can give. If you want a behavior to stop, you find a way to ignore it, to not pay attention to it, to not reinforce it. So there are general principles of behavior that you can kind of follow. But those are intuitive. A lot of them are very intuitive. Again, although, if you think about child psychologists and how they developed all these wonderful principles that are found in books, etc., saying that if a child is throwing a tantrum, you turn the other way, it's hard to do. Sometimes you're in a public space. Sometimes but that's attention that typically is very reinforcing. If a parent hasn't been attentive and now the kid does something horrible and you're attending to him, you're reinforcing that behavior that's going to happen again.
Right.
So, those are the kinds of psychology. I don't know. They're not really tricks, but they're just general.
You got Will and Cody to eat salmon now.
I did. I got them to eat salmon, and they really like it now.
My son is stuck on chicken nuggets and chicken fingers. And that's it.
It's hard. It's hard to break that because, you get taste buds. When you're born, you have all the taste buds in your throat, in your mouth, in your cheeks that you will ever have your whole life.
Yeah.
And they slough away over time. But those kids are eating foods that they like, that they've become familiar with, that don't have crazy taste, not a lot of flavor.
Right.
Because too much flavor is like, my brain is
too
exploding.
much, yeah.
It's just too much. So it's hard to break that for a while.
Right.
But you said it, I heard it on another wonderful podcast. Exposure is expansion.
100%.
So you keep exposing, you keep saying it's a good thing to try things. You praise them for the effort of trying. And eventually, once some of those taste buds kind of slough away, he's going to start eating other things.
Thank
you.
That. Yeah, because
it'll happen.
Right now the freezer looks like 4 giant packs of chicken nuggets, and it's wild. But
I have a number of friends who used to say my children only eat yellow. They only eat chicken, which is breaded, it's kind of yellow, mac and cheese, kind of yellow. That's all they do.
Yep, but that's all right. I definitely will keep trying. Yeah. I might use some of those tricks and just give them a little bit here and there, and then wait 2 weeks.
And then say, "Oh, you loved
probably
it." Work a little bit, try it.
Nah. So you've read numerous amounts of research papers and you've done your research and things like that. What research had shifted or changed your view of the brain? What research have you ever read that kind of changed your view of how you see the brain?
That's a big question, a really interesting question. I'm going to tell you what my husband Chris said about his intro class that also was similar to my intro to psychology class experience that later made a difference in my life. And that was about understanding neurons. So the cells that make up our brain, this big organ that sits inside our skull. And he said, and I think this is true of a lot of intro students, when my professor got to this section, in those days it was called physiological psychology, and then it became biological psychology, and now it's neuroscience, really. But understanding that neurons are simple cells that work in this very kind of complex but beautiful way to, in this electrochemical way that are about impulses and neurochemicals that change whether this cell fires or not. And that every thought and every behavior starts in that moment. Every dream, every word that comes out of your mouth, every sense that you feel, everything is because a set of neurons were firing. And those neurons fired just because of electrical and chemical activity. And he said when he understood that, he was like, oh my gosh, like what? I am just nothing but a collection of cells that's like responding to, and I remember too having that same experience, when I first got that lecture, and I've seen it on my students' faces when I would give that lecture, and they would really understand at the lowest level what is behavior made up of, and it's just cells responding. So it sounds very biological, and that's why it was called biological psychology, but it really truly is at the lowest level of behavior. That's where it comes from. That neuroscience and that understanding, it can't be the only way we understand behavior. So we, as psychologists, we always talk about levels of analysis. And, you can understand behavior at that level, but, okay, after a while that loses interest. Now you got to understand, again, what motivates people, what makes people comply or not, and so you got to move up those levels of analysis. And for me, once I started thinking about it, my initial research was in reading comprehension. And I was looking at how people, when they read, they take more away from what they're reading than is there on the page. So when you're reading, and now we have to talk about fiction, because we're not talking about research. But when you're reading a book that you're really engaged in, and you're reading about the coffee being poured, you have a sensory experience of that. Like, you almost smell it. It's what I used to call, it's the movie going on in your head.
Right.
It's, you see the characters. That's why sometimes movies don't work after you've read a book, because that's not how you pictured the protagonist. It's not how you pictured the actor. You're like, I don't want that person to look like that. You've got a movie in your own head. And that, to me, was a fascinating thing about reading. So I started doing, my initial research was on, it's going to be really boring, so I'm not going to go into it long, how people make inferences when they read. Right. So how we take away more, like we fill gaps between sentences. And, anyway, that's what I was initially looking at. And then I started thinking it was pretty sensory, it was like visual.
Right.
And that led me to embodiment, really, is how do we understand things? How do we understand concepts? Where does that come from?
And that's embodied.
That's what embodied is. So, you want me to jump into that?
Yeah, I want to know what that means. What is it? Embodied cognition?
Yeah. So,
what does that mean?
Embodied cognition is a theory.
Okay.
So it is just a theory. It comes from pure basic science experimental work. So it really doesn't have any application as I'm going to describe it right now. But it's a theory that's very heady, and it comes from some philosophical camps, also from some how do we build a computer to understand language camps, to psychologists going, where does our knowledge come from? And it's as simple as, how do we understand concepts that we have labels for, like love, like power? How do we understand that concept? And what this theory of embodied cognition proposes is that all of our knowledge comes from our initial bodily experiences, from our sensations, from our perceptions, how we see the world. And so all of our cognition is grounded in our body. That's how we understand a concept. So I have to give you some explicit examples to kind of make sense of that.
Yeah.
If that's true, if you put out a hypothesis like that, that's going to build a theory, then what scientists are obligated to do is test these hypotheses. Yeah. So I'm telling you, love, let's just take love, because this is a well-worn example. It's not even the best example of embodiment, but it's one that catches people. Mm-hmm. If I tell you, well, let's think about this abstract concept of love, like where would love come from? And you believe it comes from the body, then you say, well, I've got to test that hypothesis. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to think about where could love, at its simplest form, would be attachment. Where could it come from initially? So a baby is born. First thing that happens is that baby comes up to mom's chest. So it gets one very physical experience, and that is warmth. So there's skin to skin, but the basic physicality of it is warmth. And if mom is in trouble, where does the baby go? The baby goes to an incubator. What is that? Same physical experience is warmth. So now, as an embodied cognitive psychologist, I'm thinking, where does the knowledge about love come from? Maybe it's from the physicality of warmth. So I'm going to test it. I'm going to bring some people in. I'm going to stop them on the street.
Right.
This is how this research went. I'm going to stop some people on the street, and I'm going to ask some of them. One group, I'm going to say, I have this cup of coffee for you. While you are answering some just questionnaires, some random questions, would you hold this cup of coffee? And one group gets a warm cup of coffee to hold.
Right.
Okay. They're holding this warm cup of coffee and they're answering all kinds of questions. They're usually collegiate. So what's your major? When did you get here? Blah, 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 blah. One of the questions just have to say, on a rating scale, how do you feel about your friends? 1, I don't really care very much about them. 10, like, I love them to death. How do you feel about your family? Like some questions about affiliation is what we call it. Okay. Other group comes and you go, you know what? I have something for you to hold. It's just some water. Would you mind holding that? They're like, yeah, it's neutral, no temperature. Okay. You ask them the same questions. Now you look at the ratings for how they feel about their family. If they're holding something warm versus how do you feel about your family, your friends, if you're holding neutral temperature. If the theory is right, when you're holding something warm, you're going to feel more loving towards your family.
That's
towards
crazy.
your friends, and it happens.
Right.
So
That's wild.
that research showed that just the experience of warmth gave rise to the feeling of affiliation, love, attachment. So that's just the beginning of a test, right?
Right.
It just, people are like, that's just one result. That's with collegiates. That, okay, we're going to test the crap out of this idea.
Yeah.
Another follow-up to that very quick. Bring some people in. Everybody's in the same room. Half of the people in this room are asked to write a short essay about a time in which they felt included. They felt loved. They felt part of a group. They felt, again, included. The other half of the people sitting in the same room are told, write a short essay about a time in which you felt excluded, where you felt lonely, you felt you weren't part of this group. Okay. They write the essay. Right after that, you give them some random questions. Again, random. What's your major? What's your blah, blah, blah. One of them happens to be, by the way, we're having some troubles with the temperature in this room. Could you guess, what do you think the temperature of this room is? The people writing about the essay and the time in which they felt included and loved and part of a group, they judge the temperature of the room to be warmer than the people that have just written an essay about being excluded.
That's crazy. That's wild.
So now you have it going both ways. So you, as the good consumer of research, goes, okay, now I got, if I feel warmth, that gives rise to feelings of warmth in my relationships, love and affiliation. And if I think about my warm relationships, so I think about love and friendship, I also feel the room to be warmer.
Right.
So it's body to thought and thought to body. That's embodied cognition. Those are some just concrete examples of 2 very simple experiments that test that particular hypothesis.
That's wild.
But
that's crazy to know.
It's crazy.
And you led the way. You led that research.
No. That research, all of that research, was done by some just brilliant cognitive psychologists. I can name them: Art Glenberg, Larry Barcelow, Dennis Proffitt did work in perception. That's very much in the field of embodiment. Many people did that research, and all I did some of my own embodiment research. It was about holding things, etc. But I taught a class that taught students about many examples of research findings that were supportive of the theory.
Okay.
And once I taught that class, I could write a book about it.
And you wrote a book.
And I wrote a book about it.
And you wrote a book.
Yeah.
How was that? You writing
Miserable.
a book?
Yeah.
It's miserable. Is it a book or I think it's a textbook, ain't it?
It's a textbook.
Yeah, so
it's funny. I brought you one so that you
thank
can
you.
have it.
I really wanted. It's crazy. 'Cause I was talking to Will. I said we looked it up on Amazon. I said I seen the price and I said that's a lot of money.
Well, before I show it to you, I'm just going to say a funny thing. So, because I taught the class, and truthfully, my research was not one of the big things about doing research at a small college like Gettysburg, is you have a limited number of subjects, number of participants, and you can only do so much research in a given semester. And it really slows down. If you're at a university, you have graduate students to do it. You've got, big pools of 101 students. You can do a lot of research. Mm-hmm. It's hard to do research at a small institution.
Right.
And yet your tenure, your evaluations, et cetera, are a function. You're a teacher, but you're also a researcher. So I was struggling with getting research that was replicable. So you've got to do a study and then you got to do it again and again and again, and to be published. And I thought, one type of my scholarship would be to take this course that I've developed, and there isn't a book out there, and I'll just form it into a textbook on embodiment.
Right.
And that worked for me. I did it during a sabbatical. I had a 1 semester sabbatical, that bled into the summer. And so it gave me, a kind of January till August time period to write the book. And I thought, oh, I can do that because I've got an outline from my course. Like, I can write this. Writer's block. Yeah. Most of the winter I was like, yeah. I'd get a page out and be like, okay, got a page done today.
So you created your own course?
Yeah.
I
teach. Developed the course.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And then wrote the textbook for the course.
Yeah. How weird is that, right? And actually my students were relieved when eventually the book came out and I could use it in the course, because otherwise I was sending them to all of those studies, all those research papers. Read this and then read this and then read this and then read this, and the book summarized them. Mm-hmm. So the one funny story that really brought me down to earth in terms of, I am very proud of the book and I'm glad I did it. It was a struggle. It was hard to do because I have a life and I love my life. And it was hard for me to just kind of get through writer's block almost every day. So I was very happy it was finished, but it was limited. The publisher had told me, it's American Psychological Association was the publisher, and they had said, keep it to 300 pages. And I was like, yay, I'm glad I have a limit because I can talk a lot, I can write a lot. And I finished it right under 300, and they said that has to include all your references, which were a gazillion.
Right.
So I got that, I sent it off to the publisher. Not very long after, they said, you know what, your books are coming to you. You're going to get a box, and you get 10 free ones. And you also get a very small percentage of the royalties of the book, 10%.
Oh, man.
So I was like, well, this ain't going to make me rich, but okay. Right. I get 10 free books at least. Anyway, so I got my 10 free books, and Nate, here I was waiting for him. I couldn't wait for that day to get my box. I got a box, and it was this big. It was like this tall. My colleague brought it in. I was like, oh, they sent me a book. Like, wonder where the 10 are. I was like, I don't know. It's AP. Here's a book. I opened it up, and I pulled out my book. Here's my book. I was like, what happened to it? It's a pamphlet. It's not a book. It's a pamphlet. And then I realized, look at how ridiculously small the print was.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's your book.
Thank you.
Son, enjoy it. It is very, very dense, and it is not very readable. And that's because it is a textbook.
It's a textbook. You didn't just write a book, you wrote a textbook.
Yeah, so you can never read it at all. You can also occasionally read a couple pages of it on some research that I know you will think is very interesting.
I will. Sorry if you guys hear the stuff in the background. Obviously, we're in a different room today. We're getting the podcast room done up a little bit. The ceilings are going to be taller. New lighting, new things, new stuff as this platform grows. So if you hear all the hammering, cutting of wood, all the extra stuff, that's the reason. And this is the reason why we're in the Benchmark Bodega, and this is the store for Benchmark program. So this new setting today.
Yeah, it's a great place to be.
Well, I appreciate you coming on here, and like I said before, like it's crazy. We have so much. We could sit here and talk forever,
Long time.
forever, honestly. But I'm super appreciative of everything that you've helped me with in my life and all the research papers and things that you gave me, and even gifted me this book. There's something that you know I will forever be grateful for, and that's like people teaching me things, and I'm super appreciative of that. And you've done that a lot.
You're so welcome. I'm so happy to share. I mean,
Yeah.
when someone's willing to take my knowledge
Right.
and I can share it with them, it makes me so happy because it's very unique. You know, we all have such a little tiny small area of expertise
Right.
that we have, and it's unique and it's not of interest to a lot of people. So when it's of interest to you, I want to share it.